Hello, here we are again. Um, I thought I'd begin by sharing some good news since there's so much bad news, which is I haven't been out of my house for quite some time, but I have two different friends who went to two different grocery stores in Philadelphia today, and both had toilet paper. So the supply lines are strong, if nothing else. Take these little victories where we can get them. And it's been wonderful to hear from you all. I hope that you are staying safe and staying sane and enjoying this book with me. We're here for chapter 3 of Signs Preceding the End of the World by Yuri Herrera. And chapter 3, I believe, is a little bit shorter. I just looked, it looks a little bit shorter, and it is called The Place Where the Hills Meet. First, there was nothing but a frayed strip of cement over the white earth. Then she made out two mountains colliding in the back of beyond, like they'd come from who knows where and were headed to anyone's guess, but had come together at that intense point in the nothingness and insisted on crashing noisily against each other, though the oblivious might think they simply stood there in silence. "Yon them hills is the pickup. Take you on your way," said Chucho, "but we'll make a stop first so you can change." Then off in the distance she glimpsed a tree, and beneath the tree a pregnant woman. She saw her belly before her legs or her face or her hair, and saw she was resting there in the shade of the tree. And she thought, if that was any sort of omen, it was a good one. A country where a woman with child walking through the desert just lies right down to let her baby grow, unconcerned about anything else. But as they approached, she discerned the features of this person, who was no woman, nor was that belly full with child. It was some poor wretch swollen with putrefaction, his eyes and tongue pecked out by buzzards. Makina turned to look at Chucho and see if he too had been fooled, but he hadn't. Chucho told her about how one time he was taking a man back the other way because his wife was dying and they'd gotten lost. This was when he'd only just started crossing folks, and some son of a bitch rancher thought they were headed in this direction, and it was only because he chased them that they found the way back, but by then it was too late. Cat made it home, Chucho said, but by the time he got there, she was already 6 feet under. One of the first to strike it rich after going north came back to the village all full of himself, all la-dee-da, all fancy clothes and watches and new words he'd be able to say into his new phone. He made sure to round up every wide-eyed hick he could find, brought each and every one to the switchboard where he planned to teach Makina a lesson in public, as if one time she'd fucked him over, though he claimed he just wanted to show her because she knew about this stuff. He took out 2 cell phones and gave one to his mother. "Here, Yefisita, just press this button when you hear the bring, and you'll see. Just step right outside." And he brandished the other one. He gave Makina 2 patronizing pats on the forearm and said, "Tough luck, kid. It had to happen. You're going to be out of a job. Watch and learn." The young man pushed the little key and waited for the zzz of the dial tone, but the zzz didn't come. "Never mind. No sweat," he said. "These new ones don't do that," and proceeded to dial the number of the cell phone his mother was holding to her ear on the other side of the wall. Now at least you could hear peep, peep, peep as he pressed each key, and the wide-eyed stood like ninnies waiting for the thing that they were expecting to happen and yet wishing that it would turn out to be, well, more spectacular somehow, more weird. But the peep-peeps were followed only by silence, a silence that was especially weighty because it seemed as if everyone was holding their breath so as not to spoil the wondrous trick. And the mother was still standing outside, in truth far less concerned about whatever it was her son was up to than about the pot she'd left on the stove. And though the phone was still clamped to her ear, she was in fact already telling a neighbor, "Be an angel, would you? Go check on my stew." And on it went till the guy was just left looking at his phone with all his might, as though enough staring might somehow fix it. Makina held off a bit, then said, "Maybe you should have bought a few cell towers, too." The poor guy turned red when the penny dropped, and suddenly he was the only wide-eyed one in the place. That was what Makina said, but then she felt mean for messing with him, so she gave him a kiss on the cheek and said, "Don't worry, kid. They'll get here one day." Before they reached the shack where she was to change clothes, what happened was that another truck pulled right up beside them on the road to the mountains. It was black with 4 searchlights mounted on the roof, and the driver was an Anglo with dark glasses and a hat with a silver buckle. His eyes shot bullets through the 2 windows between them, still stepping on it, still stuck to them like glue. And that Chucho grabbed a cell and started to dial a number, but didn't finish till they reached the shack in the foothills, and then dialed the rest when he got out, and as soon as they picked up, said, in Anglo tongue, "Hey, officer, I got the info I promised. Yeah, right where I said last time. Yeah, but be careful, he's armed to the eyeballs," and hung up. The Anglo had pulled up ahead and parked a few yards from the shack. He stood by his truck, fingering the grip of a handgun tucked into his waistband. As soon as they went inside, Chucho said, "Gotta be quick. No telling what we're in for now. Best leave behind anything might weigh you down." In the shack, all there was a cot and a stove, and on the cot a pair of pants, a t-shirt with an Anglo print, and a denim jacket. On the stove, a pot of scalded water. Makina began to undress with her back to Chucho, who stood smoking and staring out the window at the goon on guard outside, and thought how strange it was not to feel scared or angry at having to strip naked with no wall to separate them. She took off her blouse. She could have put on the t-shirt before taking off her pants, but she didn't. She took off her pants. She took off her bra and panties, too, though Chucho hadn't told her to, and stood there, looking down at the clothes spread out on the cot, with something almost like an urge to pee, and something almost like a bated breath tingling up and down her body. "Quick," Chucho insisted. Makina knew he was still staring out the window, but his voice enveloped her. She felt that moment of tension without fear go on, and then was surprised how much time had passed without her feeling guilty for wanting what she wanted. More than leaving her boyfriend behind, she was casting off her guilt, the way you might shed belongings. But even those interminable seconds came to an end. She said, "Okay," got dressed. Chucho turned around. "What did you say to that person on the phone?" she asked. "Just what I reckon," he said, jerking his head toward outside. "Like, not only is our rancher here a patriot, but he's got his own little undercover business. Like, it's not so much he's bothered about us not having papers as he is about us muscling in on his act." "You sure?" Chucho shrugged. "Maybe the dumb fuck is just up to his neck." They stood there a moment, Makina staring at him, Chucho absorbed in his thoughts, one eye on the window the whole time. Then he said, "Well, whatever's going down, time for it to go down. So if the shit hits the fan, you head for that mountain pass and stay on the trail. Keep the sun on your back." She waited for him to start for the door before she took from her rucksack a plastic bag with the note Cora had given her, and the package Mr. H entrusted to her, and slipped them into her jacket, and then she went after him. Soon as they versed, the rancher approached, revolver in hand, though not pointing it at them. "You just took your last trip, Coyote." "I'm no coyote," Chucho said. "Ha! I seen you crossing folks," the man said, "and looks like now I caught you in the act." "Not the act I'm denying," said Chucho, "though I'm no coyote." The Anglo's expression indicated that he was engaged in a mighty struggle with the nuances of the concept. He scanned Chucho's face for a few seconds, waiting for clarification. "And now, yes, sir," chose to point the gun at them. "What I'm denying," Chucho went on, "is that you caught us." Then they all registered the fact that they had company. 2 police trucks were herring across the open country, top speed but no flashing lights. The minute the rancher was distracted by turning to look, Chucho pounced and grabbed the arm that was holding the gun. The rancher shot to kill, but it was a waste of bullets, since Chucho had wrestled the muscle away from the 2 spots where there were bodies. The rancher was big and strong, but all his strength was not enough to regain his balance. In the end, Chucho stuck 1 foot between his 2, and they both fell to the sand. The police trucks had stopped a dozen yards away, and the cops inside took aim from behind the open doors. "Git," said Chucho. Makina moved toward him, because even though she knew he was talking to her, she thought he was asking for help. He must be asking for help. Makina wasn't used to having people say, "Run away." 1 more bullet exploded from the revolver. Makina saw the barrel head on, saw the way it dilated the split second it spat fire, and the way it contracted just as the bullet clipped her side. The impact caused her to whirl, but not fall, and as she span, she took 2 steps forward and dealt the rancher a kick in the jaw. He was still moving, but had lost his sense of direction. He was aiming, like his bullets, for Chucho's neck, but where he clawed, all there was air. Chucho punched him in the chin, which didn't knock the man out, but did curb his momentum, and said, stressing each word, "I can take care of this." Makina looked to the trucks, then again to the men on the sand, then to the mountains, colliding endlessly before her, and started to run, guns and evil bastards on both sides. She heard them behind her, ordering freeze on the ground, but didn't turn. Not even when she heard another shot that must have come from a police gun, because it sounded different, less powerful than the rancher's. She ran uphill till she could no longer hear shouting behind her. Then she turned to look. The cops had the 2 men in their sights. Chucho's hands on the back of his head and the rancher seemingly unconscious. Another cop looked in Makina's direction but showed no sign of following. Only then did Makina inspect her side. The bullet had entered and burst between 2 ribs, ignoring her lung, as if it had simply skimmed beneath the surface of her skin so as not to get stuck in her body. She could see the gash of the bullet's path, but it didn't hurt and barely bled. She looked once more to where the men were arguing. Now there was no cop watching her. Chucho was on the ground talking. They stood listening in a semicircle around him. The rancher was still face down. Makina remembered Chucho's mouth saying, "I can take care of this." She guessed that he was talking, more than anything, about her, and decided to keep on climbing. Rucksacks. What do people whose life stops here take with them? Makina could see their rucksacks crammed with time. Amulets, letters, sometimes a huapango violin, sometimes a yaranera harp. Jackets. People who left took jackets because they'd been told that if there was one thing they could be sure of over there, it was the freezing cold, even if it was desert all the way. They hid what little money they had in their underwear and stuck a knife in their back pocket. Photos, photos, photos. They carried photos like promises, but by the time they came back, they were in tatters. In hers, as soon as she'd agreed to go get the kid for Cora, she packed a small blue metal flashlight for the darkness she might encounter, one white blouse and one with colorful embroidery in case she came across any parties, 3 pairs of panties so she'd always have a clean one, even if she took a while to find a wash house, a Latin Anglo dictionary. Those things were by old men and for old men, outdated the second they left the press, true, but they still helped. Like people you don't really know where a street is and yet people who don't really know where a street is and yet point you in the right direction. A picture her little sister had drawn in fat, round strokes that featured herself, Makina, and Cora in ascending order, left to right and short to tall. A bar of Jithe soap. A lipstick that was more long-lasting than it was dark, and, as provisions, amaranth cake and peanut brittle. She was coming right back, and that's why that was all she took. That's the end of that chapter. Thanks for joining today, and I will see you soon.